Unfortunately, I don't really have a PSP of my own to use. This isn't mine, so we won't be using it. Instead, we're going to improvise with a few things I have brought over here. Really should have put these closer, I'll cut that out. There they are. So, I'm going to improvise now.
Bootleg PSP.
There we are. Now all we have to do is turn it on.
The Sony PSP, also known as the PlayStation Portable, has the pride of being the first ever handheld console that we review on this show. I think it deserves a pat on the battery pack for that one. There we go. That's better.
The PSP was also the first console that... The PSP was also the first console that... The PSP was also the first console that I know nothing about! You!
Me?
I'm not scripting this, and I'm not reading this. Find someone else to do it. I'm quitting this god-awful job.
But who else is gonna do it?
Get the PlayStation fanboy to do it. He should know what he's talking about.
This is a script.
That's all I can pretty much think of, because I don't know what to do when I don't know something. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to be going.
Alright, I guess I'll go find him then.
Hey, I'm James, and I'll be taking over from Chris, as he appears to be, well, having a fit of some sort. Anyway, the PSP is Sony's...
Whoa. What are you doing? I'm supposed to be scripting here. I've changed my mind, I want my job back.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Now, where was I? Ah yeah, the PSP was Sony's answer to Nintendo's success in the handheld console market with the Nintendo DS. I must give credit for Sony for this, because it was by far the stupidest and the riskiest thing they have ever done and ever will do. Why? Well, if you took a slight peek to what happened with Sega and Atari when they did the same thing, then I'd sure you understand why I thought this seemed crazy. Me, being Sega fanboy Chris, personally didn't own a PSP, ever, so I can't really have a real opinion on it. So I'm just going to assume that it was a decent console, as the two people I know who had one seem to like it. This also means that it's basically going to be them two who's pretty much writing this script with me, as logic determines that these two buffoons would know at least something about this Game Boy Advance wannabe. So let's just get on with it then. Roll the gameplay! The PlayStation Boy Advance was Sony's first handheld console, and was the first handheld that I'm aware of to use discs instead of sticking with the faster, smaller, more efficient, and just plain out better cartridge option. The system was released to Japan in late 2004, to America in early 2005, and finally to Europe in late 2005. It was released as an all-in-one device, as it was able to access the internet to not only play games online with friends and whatnot, but also able to browse the internet with, this. Not only that, but by using the PlayStation Store, you can buy things like games, music, more games, some other useless stuff, even more games, and Sonic games. Though the DS does have online multiplayer, what it doesn't have is, well, everything else. With the PSP, you can also download applications from the internet as well as from the PlayStation Store. Though I'm not too sure why you'd want to do that, as everything that's worth getting for a PSP would be found on the PlayStation Store. Moving on from all of that useless nonsense, we have the controller. Or whatever you'd call this. From what the two people I know who actually own this thing have told me, the controls for this thing was appalling. Just look at it. Looks pretty okay, right? Well, take another look. See this thing here? Yes, that. You'd think that thing would be some sort of microphone just by looking at it. But it turns out that this thing is actually the system's analog stick. Well, it's more of a 3DS circle pad looking thing, to be honest, but you get the idea. Just imagining using this controller layout to play anything would be about as comfortable as using a stiff N64 controller to play Super Smash Bros. Melee.
Round 1.
The PS2 on the go was, for the handheld market at least, very, very advanced for the time. Even looking at it now makes the king of the handheld market, the Nintendo 3DS, look like an Atari Jaguar in comparison. Well, maybe that's a bit of an overstatement, but you get what I mean. The PSP had hardware to try and make it as similar to the PlayStation 2 as possible, eventually giving it the fan-made title of the portable PS2. Unlike every other handheld to ever exist, the PSP used discs known as UMDs, instead of going for the more sensible option of cartridges. Though this seemed quite ridiculous, this decision did have its benefits, such as the system being able to play movies and music straight from the disc. Though it wasn't quite perfect, at least it was better than the Game Boy Advance's pixelated mess. The system has 32 megabytes of main RAM and an extra 4 megabytes of DRAM in total. Though for saving your games on the thing, you need to get your hands on a PSP memory stick first. This being one of the disadvantages of using discs, or UMDs. For the colours section, to my surprise, the PSP actually had less available colours than the N64, the PSP having 16.77 million, while the N64 having 16.8 million. Not that that matters at all. And graphically, just go look at the PS2, and that's pretty much what all the games on the PSP will look like. This is the part of the episode where the script is written by PlayStation fanboy James and Xbox fanboy Cabe, more than little old me. But anyway, the PlayStation balance board had a rather linear selection of great exclusives compared to any other PlayStation family console. But the few exclusives that it did have were pretty good at least. Okay, most of them were pretty good. Some of my personal favourites would have to be Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops and Valkyria Chronicles. But I feel I should just start a list of a few games instead of moaning on about my pathetic opinions. Well, here goes. Daxter, God of War, Metal Gear Solid, Grand Theft Auto, Valkyria Chronicles, Afterburner, Ape Escape, Bomberman, Sonic Rivals, Final Fantasy, Ratchet and Clank, and this abomination. Yeah, the whole lot of us kinda ran out of games to talk about there. But enough of that, let's just jump into the music section. Because the PSP used discs, or UMDs, the music quality was almost on par with bigger and more powerful consoles like the Xbox 360 and the GameCube, whereas consoles that still use cartridges were still stuck with stuff like this. Yeah, not quite the best quality there. Because of my lack of knowledge on my own with this console, this episode's music section won't have too many examples for me to show you, but here are some examples from what I have heard. The PlayStation brick with screen had a life that's similar to what you would expect from a console that attempts to compete with Nintendo's dominance of the handheld market. Coming out just a month before the DS, the PSP was actually praised by most people due to its capabilities. But let's move back a little more before its launch for now. In 2002, Sony had just announced the PSP to the world, though not really giving many details as to what it actually is or what it can do. Sony were quite aware of Nintendo's dominance of the handheld market, so they needed to think of something good to do with the PSP that will blow everyone's minds. So later on, at about 2003, Sony gave everyone a small demonstration as to what their little bit of overcooked steak can do. After this, everyone pretty much lost their minds. So much so that people were even saying that the PSP was the first legitimate competitor to Nintendo's dominance in the handheld market, which was something that was never really seen before, or had never happened. With the closest thing to tackling Nintendo's handheld game was Sega's Game Gear, and we all know how well that went. As well thought out as Sony's plan was, later on Nintendo was still king of the hill with the DS, meaning despite the immense power that the PSP had, it alone was not enough to take Nintendo, forcing the system to fight to stay alive all the way through its lifetime. To put it short, the only time that this thing was still relevant was within the first year or two of its life, as, despite the huge technological advancements that the PSP had, the DS still had something that the PSP didn't, and that was the virtual cash machine that is the Pokemon games. I swear, Nintendo has so much power in the handheld game that they could probably trademark the words handheld and console and probably get away with it. Well, that's about all I have time for. So if you'll excuse me, I'll take my leave.